Okay, I'm back. I see that I had something crazy happen just then. The system crashed, but I'm back. Welcome to Facebook Live. I'm Donna Balzer. I am a horticulturist, an author, a speaker, and I'm here for you today. If you have gardening questions, say hello. Come on down. Let's have a chat. I was just looking at my notes that I prepared for today, and I want to start with just the basics. First of all, if you're on your computer for the first time, you haven't done Facebook Live before, go down to the bottom corner. Wait a minute, other corner on my screen. Down to the bottom corner where it says write a comment and say hello. Tell me who you are, where you come from, where you garden, and what you would like to talk about today. Today's all about gardening, but I want to hear from you on that page. So I just want to say that you can send me any gardening questions you want. I'm used to doing this on CBC Radio. I'm not used to doing everything where I have to give the responses and type in your answers, but I am going to try really hard to do that. I've got my cheat sheet here, which is my little journal that I'm writing in. And speaking of journals, I'll tell you that I am the brand ambassador for BC Greenhouses. So if you're thinking about adding a greenhouse, that's a good one. That's the BC Greenhouse Builders, and you can look them up online. And that's good. If you are thinking about writing your own notes, this is the Gardener's Gratitude Journal, and that is my latest book. And the Gardener's Gratitude Journal gives you a place to record everything from, I just harvested my bok choy yesterday, to what I did this morning was I picked some kale, which was really kind of fun. I've also got peas in my garden and beans, but they're in my outside garden. Back to the greenhouse. They're in the greenhouse. So that is really great. And if you haven't seen it yet, my older book, which is No Guff, Vegetable Gardening. And that's so much fun. Mariko McRae is our illustrator. And now it's Mariko Patterson, but that's okay. Same illustrator. She does a really good job. Those pictures are tremendous. So just wanted you to see all of that. And of course, I'm wearing my Donna Balzer apron, and if you don't have an apron for gardening in, you need those pockets to keep your iPhone and everything else. So come on down, say hello. Andrea's here already, and I know that Andrea is from Perth, Australia, so I really appreciate her popping by. Let us know what's happening there today, Andrea. So ask your garden questions, go right down to the bottom to do that. So I'm a horticulturist, I'm an author, I'm a speaker. I'm here to answer your gardening questions. I'll just turn into the light. I see Sean Marie is here. Hi, Sean, and Janine. Janine, thank you for dropping by. You are from Cranbrook and you run a garden center there. So remind us what the weather's like there. I did have some questions going into this, but I also want you to think about, because Sean was just on her page, her Facebook page, and she was just saying that she was looking at a new type of composter from Costco. So tell us more about that. Tell us why you think that might be a good idea inside your greenhouse. I've seen this in Whitehorse, actually. So if our friend from Whitehorse is here, Arlen McFarlane, it would be fun to hear from you too. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today is your compost and what you're doing, or just bird feed. We could talk about that too. I did some harvesting yesterday that I thought was really fun. Oh, and it's Natalie here from Saanich. So hello to everyone. Cranbrook, Red Deer, and Saanich. So that's it. We're ready to go. We've got all the stuff out. I'll tell you, I had a question today from, Janine starts with a question. I was going to start, but Janine got in first. She said, I had major damage done to my maple. What should I paint the wound with? What kind of major damage? Was it a snowstorm, Janine? Was it while it was still in full leaf? Because I have to tell you that we're no longer painting any kind of tree that's damaged, especially maple trees. They seem to have very liquid sap. That's why we get maple syrup out of maple trees. They have very thin sap that pours. And what we find out that heals, that helps the plant heal better. If we try to stop it, like put on a Band-Aid or something, we find that it doesn't work as good. So Janine, I wouldn't paint that. Do not paint that with anything. I will put that right in here. Do not paint that wound, but do make sure you've got a clean cut. And if you make sure you've got a clean cut, what that means is you take out your pruning saw and you prune it just where you see the little ridge coming out of the bark. You want to prune it very not flush to the main trunk, but very close to it. So look for the little ridge, that's called the branch bark ridge, and cut just outside of that. That is your protection zone on your tree. So if you've got a ripped branch or a torn branch, do that cutting back now. I normally don't prune in the fall, but when you do have to because you've had some damage done, do not paint the wound. Make sure you get a clean cut. So that is actually a really good question. And the other question I had today was also about a tree. And that was something that I got from Wendy. What did she say? Oh, Wendy had a funny thing happen. I don't know how many people have had this cold weather in the fall, followed by slightly better weather. The really cold weather has triggered Wendy's pear trees to come into bloom. Isn't that crazy? So her pear, which was a new plant, she just put it in this summer, it actually started to bloom, and she had 3 or 4 blooms on it, and she was a little panicky. She thought, is that tree going to die? And I have to say, I've never seen this happen in pears, but I have seen this happen in apple trees. So if it's happening in your apple or your pear and you're getting fall bloom, usually it's not a problem. It could be a sign of stress. Maybe your tree is just kind of throwing out an extra flower, hoping it doesn't die over the winter. And that is something you can't do anything about right now. Make sure if you didn't get those nice rainy periods in the fall that you do water in your trees, but you don't want them soggy either. So if I think Wendy's tree was specifically a pear tree, it was reblooming, and I just said to her, don't worry about it. It's not something that, it's not something you can do anything about. Okay, it looks like I have 4. Oh, yeah, there already are quite a few questions, and I hadn't seen that. So Janine had her major problem. Andrea Whiteley said spring has sprung. No, Andrea is in Perth, so she's from quite a ways away. Spring has sprung. Her roses and cottage perennials are beginning to bloom. So I think Andrea is becoming a tourist rep for Perth, Australia. I think that's really beautiful. I really wish, instead of sitting here with fall closing in, that I was on my way to Perth. Thank you, Andrea, for that. Yes, so Ian Jones. Hi, Dee. Thank you, Ian. I love it when Ian comes down, but he lives quite far away, so he saves it up as a special trip. And he says here, I want to know what your best trip is for attracting winter birds. The best tip for birds is to have your garden planted to attract those birds. So that would be a number of berry bushes. I was just in Calgary last week, and I saw the wayfaring tree. And sometimes we see these little plants and we forget about them, but the wayfaring tree is a really good example. It's a viburnum, and it is a plant that produces flowers in the spring, white flowers, and then red berries that turn to black almost in the fall, and beautiful red fall leaves. So something that's going to bloom. So go to your garden center right now if you've got a gap or a hole and they're still selling a few things. Go and find out if you can see anything at all that has berries on it right now, because if it has berries now, those are going to be your best plants for going through the winter and attracting birds. Most people are putting out seed now because this is the big migration time. But I don't know. I think you want something a little more permanent than that, Ian. I don't think you want to just put out seed. I think you're in a mild enough climate. You live in Courtenay. You could just drive out and see what they're still selling, and is there something that's putting on berries. And I really do like the wayfaring tree. That is a really good example. So most people are putting out seeds, and check what's available. For instance, the goldfinches prefer the Niger seed. The nuthatches prefer something a little harder. So the different birds have different kinds of seeds. I noticed they had bugs in boxes at a store I was at. And so actual mealworms, which are dried, are put into bags and are for sale as well. So most people are putting out seeds, but check out what's available at your garden center, because I think that it's still not too late in some areas to plant a fall shrub with berries, and then that's going to be good going forward, because we want to, we're a little bit guilty that way as gardeners. We plant everything in the spring, and then we have all these flowering plants in the spring, and we don't have anything happening in the fall. So make sure that if you don't have anything going on right now, you are at least making a list of it in your journal, and so that you can buy something in the spring that will have fall fruit, because it's that fall fruit that's so rich and feeds the birds. So check out what's available. I got to finish writing this thought. Look for fall bearing ball-bearing, like the wayfaring tree. In case you can't hear me, my husband said my speaking is getting worse as I get older. I think it's his hearing. Anyway, look for that wayfaring tree. I really like that one. That's a very good one. Okay. So does anybody else have a question? Sean says, I think the compost planter bed will be good for my greenhouse. So Sean has a geodesic dome greenhouse, which is different and quite interesting. I've actually been following you, Sean. I like the look of it. You think that the compost planter bed will be good for your greenhouse because there is more heat in the greenhouse. And that is true in cold climates. Sean's from Red Deer. In cold climates, you end up getting your compost can freeze solid for the winter. So she is wanting to do something where there's that little bit of extra heat in the greenhouse. And also composters can give off heat, so that can help heat the greenhouse as well. And vegetables will get that benefit from the compost process as it breaks down. Seems like a win-win. I had actually said on Sean's page that I wouldn't want that in my greenhouse because I find this time of year bringing out a lot of food waste. I don't put it in the city bin. I bring it out to my greenhouse. And I'm finding that there's a lot of fruit flies because of all the fruit that we eat in that food waste. And if I was to have that inside my greenhouse, that would just create a nightmare for me. Maybe I'm not as clean a gardener as Sean. So she is definitely, and I hope she lets us know how that works out for her. And she got that at Costco, so it seemed to be a good price. Hope that works out for you, Sean. I know it wouldn't work for me. I'm not. I keep saying this to people, but even though I'm a professional gardener and I'm a horticulturist, I'm not always as good a gardener as some people because I'm busy on my Facebook Live talking to people, or I'm traveling for work. And I did just get back from Calgary, where I did lots of garden consults. The weather was tremendous. I also met up with a potential sponsor so that we can get some more little jobs in the garden videos going on my Facebook page, and that would be so much fun. Now I missed Al Chamika's question. Not sure I cannot go straight to live and send a comment. She sent a picture of your comment. I did not get Al's, didn't get his picture of the compost, but if you send it later, I think it should be able to come in. But I didn't get that yet. But how are you doing your compost, Al? I think you told me last year that you are actually composting in your little bit of a greenhouse as well, Alan, and I wonder how that worked out for you. So send that picture again, and we'll see if we can see it. Nice. Okay, birdseed. And do you suggest we get birdseed? Is that good for the garden? You know, Ian, good for the garden. I love that. I love what's good for the garden. And the thing is that some kinds of bird seed, like sunflower seed, has the shells still on it, and sometimes some kinds do not. And the seeds with the shells, actually, you'll find those shells will almost become a bit of compost as they fall to the ground around your bird feeder. But sometimes the birds just kick around the seed. And the kinds of seed I do not like are the ones with too much millet, because the millet falls to the ground and just germinates and becomes a real problem. So I don't like the ones with the, I don't like the ones. I see that Ian's also said he has lots of birds on his mountain ash, and the robin loves that. I think that's really great. Ian Jones, awesome fall shrubs with berries, great advice. And yes, I am journaling in the 3 years gratitude journal. Good for you, Ian. Nancy Jenkins says, do I just pull the veggies that never made it, or do I turn the soil? Nancy, surprisingly, my daughter had a carrot over winter in Calgary last year. And I don't know, Nancy, it's her first week. Welcome. I don't know where you're gardening from, but many plants will overwinter. For instance, my daughter had her carrots overwintering, and I've talked to the Sharps, and they're living in Calgary as well. They've had their parsnips overwinter. So I definitely don't assume things are dead. Don't assume you have to go in and pull things out. I don't know where you're gardening. Let me know. But I don't assume that things are going to die, because with climate change, things are changing all the time. So do not pull out things. You can, if you want, you can cut the tops off things, or you can just cover them with mulch at this time of the year. And the best mulch, we had a huge conversation about leaves last week. The best mulch are just finely chopped leaves, and those can be set out on the garden. If you can't chop your leaves, just put them on as is. So I would say, You don't know what vegetables are going to make it. In Edmonton, for instance, and I'll just make that in my comment, in Edmonton, Tyler was telling me that he actually left his spinach in over winter, and so it was up earlier in the spring. And also I've heard from people that have left many things like lettuce. If they're just really tiny, sometimes they'll come back in the spring too. So don't assume anything is dead. Assume that you can leave most things. If you want to, this is a good time to improve your soil, but simply do that by top dressing, not by pulling out plants. I think that's your best bet. I leave lots of plants. I've got lots of things still in my garden. And I think that's probably your best bet. Okay. That is the question from Nancy. Now, Sean says, yes, fruit flies were a problem until the snow happened and then the freeze. I haven't bought the planter composter yet, but I'm hoping to. A Christmas gift idea. Well, that's great, Sean. So again, let me know. My soil doesn't freeze solid in my greenhouse, and part of that is because I am in a warmer climate now. I've moved from the prairies, but part of it also is that it stays warmer in the greenhouse. The greenhouse can warm up during the day, and if you've got a fruit fly problem, well, let's not talk anymore about fruit flies. That's a nightmare. You can also, if you've got really good compost, maybe eventually, especially if you've got some horse manure in the compost, you might have nematodes, and those can actually kill your fruit flies by eating the larvae, which is very exciting. Natalie says, in addition to Nancy's comment, how do you feel about the trend towards no distribution of the soil, including leaving the root balls in the ground? And Natalie, yes, that is exactly, yes, leave the soil untouched. And also leave those root balls in the ground. Sometimes what happens is in the spring, you still see the root balls, you're going to end up maybe just breaking them up a bit, but turning the whole thing over, especially if you have thin soil, you'll end up finding out that you're putting the best soil underneath and the worst soil on the top. So in fact, I don't do a lot of turning. I do more top dressing, maybe some scuffling. If I'm in the spring, I'm trying to plant it and prepare it, but I certainly don't do a lot of turning. Leave the root balls in the soil as is. And if they don't break down, again, adding compost on top really, really, really helps. So that's good. I see Sean replied to like that too. She says she likes the no-till gardening, the lasagna layering idea. She likes that a lot. And I also like that a lot. So that's great. I feel like Sean Marie and we're on the same page on a lot of these things. I do believe that the microorganisms are impacted and there is a loss of soil structure, but I'm not the expert. This is what I basically did with my clay soil flower beds, and now the soil is amazing. So Natalie and Nancy, Sean and I are both on that same page. If you can leave your soil and just build it and not turn it, you're actually going to find that you get better soil over time. And good for the garden too. I think we might have talked about that before, good for the garden, but I want to just make sure that we re-emphasize that leaving your soil in place is really good for it. We're getting a lot of great feedback here. Nancy says she's from Medicine Hat and she was not able to plant underground due to the residue from dogs next door. So all of her vegetables are above ground. Now that's a little bit trickier, Nancy. If all your vegetables are above ground, I don't know if your planters are insulated or if you're using pots, but it's really hard to overwinter plants. But again, things like kale, it has to be down to -8. So I never rush into cutting out and I never take out the root balls. So just leave what you can in place. Medicine Hat was a bit crazy this fall. They did have some cold weather, but it's actually going to be good. And listen to Sean Marie. And there's Margot. Margot gave me some really good suggestions for my talk. Thank you, Margot. Margot said that she thinks gardening it's a miracle to start from a seed and go from that seed just to grow a plant. And she loves the miracle in the garden. And next weekend, I'm giving a talk in Parksville. And I was just kind of brainstorming what could I add that would be interesting. And I never thought about that, Margot. So thanks for that. Let's get to your next question. You said we always leave our parsnips out in the garden over winter, which the sharps do as well. And they are one of the first spring vegetables we look forward to. They're much sweeter than they are in the fall. And that's it exactly. So we were trying to tell Nancy, although Nancy did say to us that she's growing in pots. So I don't know if her parsnips would overwinter as well in pots, but don't rush in. Never rush in. And I think Margot's made that really good point. Good point not to rush in. And thanks again, Margot, for those ideas for my talk. You would think I would have it ready. The talk is going to be given next week, next Sunday, actually, but it's sold out, so you can't come. But good point about the parsnips, because I think that's really tremendous. Parsnips. And that's on the prairies. I think Margot's growing near Carbon. And so that's right just northeast of Calgary. So she is, it's not like she's growing in Vancouver or something. So that kind of tip really helps prairie gardeners. I really like that. Okay, what else have we got here? Wow, lots of questions. That's very good. Oh, Nancy, actually, I guess that's a theoretical question because she's just gotten back to us. She's thinking of growing in big pots. I would say, Nancy, if you can actually build a structure, maybe look at the structures that Sean has put on her page, which are like they call them a keyhole design. So it's flat on one side and then two sides, almost like a C in your garden, because that gives you a place to walk in and plant. And we only have, no matter how tall you are, most people can't reach further than 3 feet. But if you find that you grow in big boxes rather than pots, you can insulate those easier. You use the rigid insulation, and that helps from the wind drying out the pots. And the pots don't dry out as fast. You end up with better soil. So I wouldn't grow in pots if I didn't have to. I would prefer to grow in large planters if you can. So I'll just put that in as a comment. Here we go. And insulate those large planters. And I think that Nancy, especially in Medicine Hat, you're going to be off to the races. So I wouldn't worry about that. And Dina Johnson has just joined, so that's great. If you've got a question, Dana, this is the forum. You just go down to the bottom and you click on, where it says that you can add a comment, and we will get back to you. I forgot to show the Gardening Under Lights book. This is the teaser. I've already given it away. Carolyn in Calgary won this book. But once a month, I have a special. This is really a cool book, all about how to. It's Leslie Halleck's book, and it's all about what kind of lights that you need to grow indoors. It goes through all the different crops. So if you're looking for a good book to get you through gardening this winter, I like this Gardening Under Lights, and I gave it away. And if you haven't seen, where is Donna giving away all these books, because I have a lot of books to give away, I give them away on my newsletter, and you can get to my newsletter at donnabalzer.com, and I've just gone over 1,000 on my newsletter, so that's very exciting. I also, if you've been following along, went over 1,000 last week on my Facebook page. So one person said she likes me every time she reads something. That was Donna. And I said, you can't just like the comments, you have to like the page. So we did manage to get over 1,000 people, and that was thanks to Ian's help, and I'm really appreciating that. So that's really good. So if you are sitting there with a question, or you're someone like Al that has not been able to get the photo through to me, try again. I mean, it might come, and you might be able to still send that. I wanted to also show you because we usually take about a half an hour for Facebook Live, but I want to show you something I picked up. Oops, one of those little flies just fell out. This is something that I just picked up out in my garden yesterday off the ground. I'm going to show it to you. These self-seeded, and if you don't know what that means, it means it was a volunteer plant. It came in on its own, or the birds brought it in, and they're tiny little papery husks. And when you squish them, I'll try to bring it up closer to the camera. When you squish them, the little fruit comes out, and it's super cute. When you eat it, those fancy, it's falling on. Oh, that one fell on the floor. We'll try a new one. When you squish them and the little fruit comes out, you can use those in pies, or you can use those little fruits there we go. You can use them in your dessert. I had some for breakfast this morning. So my dog found out about them. If you haven't seen Corley lately, it's because she had her hair cut, and I don't like her new haircut. So this is called a ground cherry. And this is something I just found out in my garden. It's not a native plant here. It's something that comes, I think, from South Africa. And it's related to the tomato, but it's super sweet. It's a little berry. And Again, if you've eaten at a fancy restaurant, you've probably gotten them. So I collected 3 containers of these just out in the area. I don't know if you remember earlier this spring, Ian was down filming and we were forced to cut back all the trees in the back half of our lot because our neighbors above us have a height restriction on them. So we had to cut back all those trees. I was really sad about that. And what happened was we got petunias and acacia and things that we had not even seeded. We got millet, we got these ground cherries. The ground was just covered with things that are growing. And it's pretty exciting actually to have these ground cherries and to be able to eat those. Very good. Let's see if we had any more new questions. Aunt Molly's, is that a local name? Aunt Molly's is one of the brands. So if you're thinking about buying ground cherry from a seed catalog, they often call them the Aunt Molly's ground cherry, or they just call them ground cherries. So these ones, because I didn't seed them, they volunteered. It's very fun. So Sean, I wonder if you've grown those or if you've just had them show up wild. Sean said she did take my advice about my tree leaves and started chopping them, and I think that that's really cool. Way to go. Oh yeah, thanks Ian. Way to go. Plus 1,000 on Facebook. I think Ian told me we have 1,008 now. So we figure, why not 1,500? Send it all out to your friends. That's really great. Natalie says she has lots of rats in her area. And we've tried several composters, including a secure one that her husband built, and they always get in. He just bought home a food-grade steel drum. We are going to try to drill some holes in it and try that for vegetable garden waste. Well, that's why, Natalie, if you have looked on my webpage, you'll see that I only use the Speedy Bin, because the Speedy Bin is developed by a lady in Victoria, and she had rats, and now her daughter has taken over the business. It has metal sides, and it has, what I like the best is it has a locking lid. So if you were going to get something smart like a raccoon, the rats can't get in because it's green on the base, but the rats themselves, I can't get in from the bottom, can't chew through. There's little holes that the air can still move through. But the best point is it has the locking lid. So if your husband's building you a drum, make sure you incorporate a locking lid, because a lot of those smarter animals like squirrels and raccoons can use their little hands, and they can open it up. And once they're in, you can't keep them out. So good luck with your home built one. I've got the Speedy Bins, and now I've got 3 of them. And you say, why do you need 3 bins? It's because I have so much stuff. I have almost a double lot here. So I do have a lot of stuff. And even though they're speedy and I get compost every spring and every fall out of the same bin, I still produce a lot of compost. So it's been really working well for me. So if you haven't seen my Speedy Bins, just have a look at my shop on donnabalzer.com. Maybe I'll type that in here. I only use the Speedy Bin anyways. It has the metal sides and a metal screen on the base. And that really works, keeps the raccoons out and rats. But it's a serious problem. When I was helping people garden in Calgary, in Alberta, the squirrels were such a problem. And we always called squirrels the rats with the tails, because they would, well, they look a lot like rats, but they have tails. They would get in and they would chew all of the plastic, because almost everyone in Calgary uses plastic, those plastic composters, the black bins, and they would chew right through it. And if you've got something that they can chew right through, whether it's wood or whether it's plastic, it doesn't work. So I use the Speedy Bin. You can see that on my website. Just have a quick look, see what it's like. Oh my gosh, we're already up to time. Just let me make sure I've answered everybody's question, because I just love getting these questions. What I do is I stay on after, even though when we're not live anymore, I'll stay on, I'll see what your questions are, and then we get people answering back and forth. It's just really a lot of fun and lots great. So how do you feel about the trend towards distribution of the soil? I think I've read all of those. Margot leaves her parsnips in the ground. Nancy's growing in big pots. Sean Marie likes the advice about the leaves. Ian's way to go, 1,000 people. The rats, which we've dealt with the Speedy again. Aunt Molly's is the name of that's the ground cherry name. So we'll just write that down. If you're looking to buy it, you can often buy it under Aunt Molly's. as I said, or you can just hope a bird brings it in and you'll get some for yourself next year, or bring one home from a restaurant. And see if there's anything else before we pack it up for today. I think that's it. Oh, Dana Johnson said, I'm new to hydrangeas, planted a new one in June, got a beautiful pink flower. Because it's young and not manicured, I used a rubber wire to tie it so the snow doesn't flatten it in Calgary. Is that okay? The truth, Dana, in Calgary, you don't have to actually, it doesn't matter if they get flattened. A rubber wire is fine. I'm fine with that. It's good. But honestly, hydrangeas always bloom on new wood, and we'll always be talking about new wood and old wood with pruning, so we'll review it again. But if it's blooming on new wood, it doesn't matter if it dies back over the winter. It doesn't matter if you cut it back. It'll just regrow new stems in the spring and bloom on those new stems. And that's really important, because if it's only blooming on old wood and then they die back because you get a Chinook or something happens, that's a problem. So Dana is trying to leave her stems, and it's young and it's not manicured. She's now tied them up. It's going to be okay. But don't over worry this, Dana, because what you're going to find is that these hydrangeas bloom on new wood. And that means that even if it dies back, you can still expect to get some flowering. And honestly, I don't like to prune them in the fall. Just like the raspberry discussion that we had last week, I don't prune my hydrangeas in the fall because I want to wait and see what died back. If you only get this much growth that's still living in the fall, the little buds will start from there. If you get a lot of growth, a lot of dieback in the winter, maybe the buds are going to start really low down. And I don't want to tell the plant, oh, I think you're going to die, so I'm cutting you right back. I'd rather wait for the plant to tell me what's dead, what's alive, and then I prune. Usually with hydrangeas, it's later in June when you start to see the buds, because you don't want to remove anything that's going to be a bloom for you. And hydrangeas are tricky enough. We don't need to add extra complications. Well, you guys, you've given us so many questions today. And as I said earlier, I will I'll check and see if anybody else, has more questions going forward, and I will answer those. Margot was saying about canola seed, because she's on the farm and they have a lot of canola seed. I wonder, Margot, if you get lots of if you have the birds spreading it and you have canola coming up here and there and everywhere. Really fun. So I think we've answered most of the questions. Thank you for coming. I'll see you on Sunday if you come to my talk in Parksville. I don't know if you'll be coming. Apparently it's sold out. Keep your eyes and ears open. Sign up for my webpage at Donna. I send out a newsletter once a month. So if you get that, next time I'm giving away the 101 chicken keeping hacks. So sign up for my webpage at donnabalzer.com. Watch for me speaking next week, and join me again for Facebook Live next Monday. And I'll keep trying with that photo. I hope it comes through. Thank you so much. Talk to you next week.